You must have heard of the most devastating crime stories ever, but in this video, we bring you more than just crime stories. We bring you the very best, the top 5 most insane crime twists you've ever heard about. Yeah, you'd hear both the stories and the twists too. Let's get right in. Number 5. The motorcycle and power sports dealership, opened by Scott Ponder in South Carolina in 2001, was the scene of several murder cases 2 years later after its establishment. Ponder's business thrived so much that it became a hangout for other bike enthusiasts, and Ponder's friend, Brian Lucas, had also been hired as the service manager. On November 6, 2003, Noel Lee, one who frequented the place, called to see if he could drop by, and they answered affirmatively. He was there 10 minutes later, but found a sight that almost looked like a prank upon his arrival. Brian and Ponder were lying in a pool of blood. It surely wasn't a prank, and Lee ran in to call 911. But there was more horror inside. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, lay dead on the floor, while the recently hired mechanic, Chris Sherbert, slumped over a bike he'd been working on. All 4 people at the shop had been shot and killed. As soon as investigations began, the last person to see the 4 victims alive was questioned. This customer claimed they saw a man in the shop inquiring about a motorcycle, but the identity of this mysterious other customer couldn't be found. Scott Ponder's window then became the center of investigation, especially after her child's DNA was wrongly matched with a DNA sample from her husband's friend, Brian. She adamantly denied and requested another test, and sadly, the outcome was the same. As a result, she refused to speak any further to the police, raising more suspicions. For 18 months, she was monitored closely, and after no evidence was found, they decided to take a look at Beverly and Brian's DNA. And surprisingly, Beverly's DNA didn't match her son's. It was at that point that the police realized that Scott and Brian's DNA samples had been mixed up, and Melissa was vindicated. John Douglas, a former FBI agent and renowned serial killer profile, was involved a year later. However, nothing serious was discovered for over a decade, and the case became a cold case. But an answer lied ahead 13 years later when an unrelated crime occurred. In 2016, Charles Davis Carver and his girlfriend, Kayla Brown, went missing. They had been cleaning a property for a real estate agent. Police pinged their phones and followed the couple's last known location until they ended up in a 95-acre property owned by a real estate agent, Todd Kohlhepp. Kohlhepp had a criminal record and was an ex-convict who had spent 15 years in prison for assault and kidnapping. On the property, they found missing Kayla chained in a container. When rescued, she revealed Kohlhepp had shot her boyfriend after an argument. Kohlhepp was interrogated, and during one interview, he admitted to having killed more people than the discovered ones. He went on to tell of a story of how he had visited a shop in 2003, where an employee implied that they were involved in the loss of his bike after he went there to get another. According to him, he returned a few more times and was mocked after each visit, and then he was set for revenge. He delayed till other customers left before he killed the 4 people there. It's exactly what you're thinking. Kohlhepp was the criminal for the Superbike murders. Though his interviews had some inconsistencies, they were explained away by investigators who believed the details could be confused after such a long time. One disturbing event around this is that before Kohlhepp was found, Brian's family hired a private investigator who gave the police a list of 400 Superbike customers with 15 highlighted names, including Kohlhepp's. Unfortunately, the list was never investigated. If it was, he could have been stopped, and many more lives would have been saved before he took them. Kohlhepp is currently serving multiple life sentences for killing 7 people. Perhaps, if the list was investigated, he'd be serving 4 instead. That's definitely still huge. Well, it's family time, it's crime time. Let's go on to the next, where we see bloodlines shattered and rubbished at the face of crimes. Number 4. If not death, what else could destroy a perfect family? The Whitaker family in Sugar Land, Texas was an epitome of perfection until the painful intervention of death. The family of 4 were out in a dinner to celebrate the graduation of their eldest son, Bart, from Sam Houston State University. The dinner was full of surprises for Bart, as he got a $4,000 Rolex wristwatch present from his parents, Kent and Patricia. It was just one of the many luxurious presents Bart had always gotten from his parents, including multiple luxury vehicles and a lakeside townhouse. On getting home after dinner, the most unexpected happened. Kevin, the family's last son, entered the front door and got shot in the chest by a masked intruder that's been waiting inside the home. Unfortunately, Patricia was right behind him, and like her last son, she was also shot in the chest. The father of the house, Kent, wasn't left out as well. Kent was shot at an angle just 6 inches from his heart. But where was Bart while all this happened, you asked? As soon as they got home, he had headed into his Chevrolet Yukon to check for messages. And on hearing gunshots, he rushed into the house to confront the shooter, and they engaged in a brutal combat. Eventually, Bart was shot in the arm, and the gunman escaped through the back door. And what was the outcome? Kevin died on the spot. Patricia made it to the hospital and gave up the ghost there. Only Bart and his father survived the tragedy of that night. The general assumption was that the Whitakers' arrival disturbed an ongoing robbery, but nothing looked scattered or stolen in the house after the incident. At the scene, a Glock handgun registered to Kevin was found alongside a black leather glove, beside Bart's Yukon. It appeared that the intruder got into the house through a crawl space in Kevin's room and had stolen his gun. The initial stages of investigation produced the most unpredictable revelation. Bart never went to university, but had lied about his schooling and taken the money given to him for tuition. More details were soon revealed when Adam Hipp, a high school mate of Bart, came forward and told detectives how Bart had asked him to help in killing his parents 2 years before. Shockingly, it was the exact scenario that played out 2 years later. But what's more, both Kent and Patricia knew about the earlier plan. The police had informed them about the plan, but they deemed it too strange to be real. Bart also assured his parents that it was all a misunderstanding. But again, a year before then, in 2000, Bart had also put a similar plan that fell through. Hipp, looking to avoid prosecution for his earlier involvement, connived with the police to record Bart's conversations. And in one of those, Bart was heard offering Hipp $20,000 to lie about his involvement in the failed attempt. But the police didn't really bring Bart in, an act they would bitterly regret. Bart's Yukon was found empty near a Houston apartment complex in 2004. After he wasn't seen for long, the police then went after those he'd been close to at the time of the shooting to know his whereabouts. After much probes, Bart's co-worker, Stephen Champagne, confessed. He wasn't aware of Bart's whereabouts, but he confessed that Brashear, Bart's roommate, was the shooter, having picked up Brashear from the Whitakers' house on the night of the shooting. But Bart was still not found. It was just more complicated. In September, a man named Rudy Rios told the police a shocking story of how Bart had brought his ID from him and paid him to drive him to Mexico. Once in Mexico, Bart used Rudy's ID and told people fake tales about himself, his gun wound, and even his family members. Finally, Bart was tracked down and arrested. He had planned the shooting so he could inherit $500,000, claiming to have done so because he'd cracked under the immense pressure his family placed on him. His friends joined him after he promised them millions. Champagne was given 15 years in exchange for testifying and is no longer in prison. Within just half an hour of trial, Bart was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. But it was his father, who he tried to kill, that kept campaigning against his death. He was to be executed on February 22, 2018, and had eaten his final meal, about to be killed, before his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after his father's campaigning saved his life. His father still visits him in prison, where he'll be for the rest of his life. What do you think about Bart's father? Would you do the same? Let us know in the comments section. And we're in the top 3. If you journeyed this far, you sure do have some faith in us. Kindly hit the like button and drop your comments on what you feel about what you've seen so far. Number 3. No one would have ever thought that the renovation of a house would cause problems to anyone other than a construction engineer. But that was exactly the case in San Marino, California in May 1994, when a house was being renovated. Everything seemed perfect until the backyard was dug up for a pool to be installed. And guess what? another pool was found in the ground, a pool of human remains. After much investigation, the bones were believed to belong to an adult who had been struck on the head by a blunt object and stabbed 6 times afterwards. Well, long before the renovation, the house had belonged to a woman, Dee Dee Sohus. In the 1980s, Dee Dee had lived there with her son, John, and her son's wife, Linda. Also on the property was a British baronet named Christopher Chichester, whom she allowed to live rent-free in the guest house. However, John and his wife didn't stay with Dee Dee for too long before they left her and went missing. But not so instantly. The couple were believed to have traveled down from California to New York to look for jobs on February 1985. But soon after the couple became missing, the guest, Christopher Chichester, disappeared as well. But he was just another guy living rent-free, so no one really looked for him yet. On a few occasions after their disappearances, Linda's mom received some mysterious postcards with her daughter addressed as the sender, one of which read, "Mom, I think we need a geography lesson, but not too bad." Sadly, the case was abandoned for a decade until the remains were found in Dee Dee's old backyard when the new occupants were about to install a pool. Drawing from the forensic analysis of the remains, John Sohus was never missing. He was right there at the backyard of his house, killed and buried under the ground. But again, the case died down until 2008, where a man named J.P. Clark Rockefeller was on the run after kidnapping his own daughter in Boston during his parental visit. He was manhunted for a week before he was found. Upon being found, he faced charges of kidnapping, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and endangering a minor. But his popularity for this revealed something more mind-blowing. Clark Rockefeller was familiar. Yeah, he looked just like Christopher Chichester. But more than the semblance, Clark Rockefeller and Christopher Chichester were the same man, and both names weren't his. He had lied about his names, his identity, and his origin as well. His real name was Christian Gerhardt Reiter, a German national who came to America in 1978 at age 17. He was so good at his trickery that he never got caught until he tried to kidnap his own daughter. Investigators then revisited the disappearance of the Sohus from 20 years earlier, after his kidnap case unraveled many other crimes. Following some investigation, he was charged with John Sohus's mother, which he blatantly denied. One of the many evidences against him came from an elderly couple who claimed he tried to sell them a rug with a quarter-sized spot of blood in it. More so, John's truck was found in Connecticut, where it was being sold by Christopher Chichester. He vanished and went into hiding after the couple went missing, dyeing his hair blonde and growing a beard. Regardless of the evidence, Gerhardt Reiter's defense team alleged that Linda killed John instead. They proposed that she had killed him and intentionally vanished, with the postcards used as proof. However, the lead investigator also suggested that Gerhardt Reiter had been trying to trick Dee Dee out of her house, hoping she'd leave the place to him. With John being the only obstacle to this goal, he killed him. Eventually, Dee Dee made the Weatherbys couple her inheritor, not Gerhardt Reiter, since the couple had taken care of her before her death. But Gerhardt Reiter had introduced them to Dee Dee too. After getting $40,000, he was to get some $100,000 more following the success of their plan. Shockingly, this vital information was never brought up in court. However, Gerhardt Reiter was charged with the first-degree murder of John Sohus, and ever since, there's been no trace of Linda Sohus. Sitting at number 2 is another family crime twist you never saw coming. Let's dive right in. Number 2. The greatest tragedy is when tales of your wealth are only told in the past. John List did all he could to avoid this, but it ended badly for him. Around the 1960s, from the 19-room mansion of John List and other luxuries in New Jersey, you would never doubt that his family had everything. John List, the vice president of a bank, lived so large with his wife, 3 kids, and his mother, until he lost his job and struggled to find another. Rather than explain the new situation to his family, he instead dressed daily to go sit at the filing station and take naps, believing it was too shameful to tell his family. However, he noticed they would get hinted at if he couldn't pay bills, but he didn't go on welfare as well, thinking the whole community would know about his struggles. He then found a solution in his mother's bank account and started stealing to keep paying for his mortgage. But this wasn't a permanent solution, as the bank soon threatened to foreclose on the house. He realized his lies would be exposed and thought of one thing: disappearing. He began his perfect plan by stopping his family's mail at the post office, cashing in on his mother's saving bonds, and making calls to everyone who would check on them, saying the rest of the List family had left for North Carolina to visit his mother-in-law and he would join them soon, all to ensure that no one looked for them. Next, he cut himself out of every picture in the house to make it difficult to track him down. Afterwards, he went to the John F. Kennedy International Airport, not to board a plane, but to park his car as a fake clue before taking a bus back into the city. John seemed to be a master planner, doesn't he? After all these, he disappeared. Since John had called to inform them of their departure, no one was bothered until a month later when the police came knocking. Inside the List mansion, the police found the rest of the family laying on the floor in the ballroom, and John's mother upstairs, all shot by John before he fled. John was untrackable, and the case went cold for years until 1989, 18 years later, when the case featured on America's Most Wanted. It included a picture of John List created by a sculptor's impression of his current look. In Denver, neighbors recognized the man on the TV, but it wasn't John List. He was known as Robert P. Clark. However, on recognizing Clark and John as the same person, the neighbors called the police and had him arrested 11 days later. John had taken the new name after fleeing the crime scene. He married a widow, moved to Virginia, and gotten a new job. In court, he revealed all that had happened to his family. On November 9, 1971, John stood behind his wife as his kids left for school and shot her while she drank her morning coffee. Upstairs, he met his mother having breakfast, gave her a kiss, and shot her in the head. He dragged his wife's body into the ballroom and cleaned up to keep his children unsuspicious once they arrived from school. The call informing concerned friends about their departure happened while he waited. His kids came home and he killed them one by one. First was his eldest daughter, 16-year-old Patricia, and next, the youngest, 13-year-old Frederick. He went on to support his 15-year-old son, John Jr., at his high school soccer game before driving him home and shooting him too. Leaving his mother upstairs, he dragged the other bodies to the ballroom and shockingly slept in the house that night. The next day, he left the lights on, turned on music, and escaped. In John List's twisted justification for killing his family, he claimed it was the only way to save them and ensure they went to heaven. In 1990, however, he was found guilty and sentenced to 5 life terms. At 82 years old, he died in prison in 2008. And finally, to the very first. But before we move into the first one and the last on the list, kindly hit the subscribe button to keep top quality crime content like this and turn on notifications to receive updates as well. Number 1. It was one of the most puzzling cases for the investigators involved, and despite the 50,000 euros reward offered by the victim's family, the case stalled for months. In September 2010, Greg Flanagan, a Louisiana oilman, made a journey of no return into the Elegant Hotel in Texas. The next day, 2 of his co-workers went to the hotel to find him after he hadn't appeared at his office. The room where he laid lifeless, though scattered, had nothing missing in it and was too serene to resemble a crime scene. Being a heavy smoker and with a cigarette stuck between his fingers when he died, it was assumed that his death was from a natural cause, but then the examination revealed otherwise. He had bruises, lacerations, and injuries in his internal organs that looked like the injuries of crash victims. As a result, it was concluded that he'd been beaten or crushed to death. But this contradicted the setting of the crime scenes, leaving no evidence to be laid hold of. Greg's journey of no return was looking to be a relatively silent one. Only one unusual thing was found. Greg had made microwave popcorn and blown an electrical circuit. The circuit breaker needed repair, and the maintenance man was sent up. The maintenance man, a known sex offender, could have been the culprit then, but sadly, he wasn't. He had an alibi. The men in the room next door were a group of electricians who met in one room to drink. Perhaps Greg could have been beaten in a brawl with them after he knocked out power. But the man hadn't seen Greg, and his injuries didn't completely look like a beating too. A breakthrough came when legendary investigator and DEA special agent Ken Brennan was involved, and he began interviewing everyone, including the examiner. As the legendary investigator he was, Ken was quick to notice a clue no one else had noticed. The cigarette was in Greg's left hand, while his wife revealed he smoked with his right. Ken Brennan explained that he must have stood up and switched the hand, perhaps to open the door. Once again, the electricians were suspected here. Greg could have stood up to answer the door when they knocked after he had blown the power, and he could have been attacked by them. Brennan interviewed the electricians, but he got something entirely different to hold on to when one of the men commented about a gun going off in a hotel. The hotel room was then inspected again, this time in search of a bullet. No bullet was found after hours of searching, but Brennan noticed a small indentation in the wall. On checking the room next door, there was the small mark of a bullet entering the wall, and the exit was the indentation in Greg's room. You know what it was. Greg had been shot, but that wasn't all. The medical examiner disagreed to Brennan's findings, claiming there was no bullet wound, and they wouldn't have missed something like that. Together, they re-examined the autopsy. Just then, Brennan queried if there was the possibility of a bullet entering through the scrotum, seeing the lacerations and bruises there. The medical examiner agreed, claiming it was possible if it entered at the right angle and would have disguised the bullet entry because of the folds of flesh. Definitely, the bullet would have torn up through his body, damaging his internal organs as a result. Notably, it was the hole in his heart that cleared the examiner's doubts. The night Greg died, a few of the electricians were drinking in the room next door, and one of them, Lance Mueller, was playing around with a pistol. It accidentally went off, with a bullet going into Greg's room through the wall, striking him as he held his cigarettes. Notably, it struck him through his scrotum and went up his body from there. What a startling occurrence. The electricians weren't sure someone was staying next door to them, as they truly hadn't seen Greg. Mueller tried to hide the evidence of a bullet hole in the room, and when Greg's death were deemed to be from natural causes, Mueller deemed it a coincidence. However, he was arrested and charged with the manslaughter of Greg Flanagan. He pleaded no contest to reckless manslaughter and criminally negligent manslaughter charges. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. What a twist it truly was. If you journeyed down here with us and you haven't done the needful, do well to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get the very best of crime contents like this. And if you want a continuity of this intriguing list, let's know in the comment section as well. We'll see you again. Until next time, peace out.